according to the dancing master. Then he glanced at himself, and recalled the reflection he had so lately quitted in his bedroom. It was impossible. No woman with eyes could choose the one when the other wooed. It was Hyperion to a satyr. That quotation came aptly. He forgot that a man's a man for a' that. And yet there was a clue, which he had often wanted, to her changed conduct towards him. If she loved this man, if he hated the fellow, and longed to strike him, he would know all. Mary Barton, let me see. Ay, that is the name of the girl. An arrant flirt the little hussy is, but very pretty. Ay, Mary Barton is her name. Jem bit his lips. Was it then so that Mary was a flirt, the giddy creature of whom he spoke? He would not believe it, and yet how he wished the suggestive words unspoken. That thought must keep now, though. Even if she were, the more reason for there being someone to protect her. Poor faulty darling. She's a good girl, sir, though maybe a bit set up with her beauty. But she's her father's only child, sir. And he stopped. He did not like to express suspicion, and yet he was determined he would be certain there was ground for none. What should he say? Well, my fine fellow, and what have I to do with that? It's but loss of my time and yours too, if you've only stopped me to tell me Mary Barton is very pretty. I know that well enough. He seemed as though he would have gone on, but Jem put his black, working right hand upon his arm to detain him. The haughty young man shook it off, and with his glove pretended to brush away the sooty contamination that might be left upon his light great-coat sleeve. The little action aroused Jem. "I will tell you in plain words what I have got to say to you, young man. It's been telled me by one as knows, and has seen, that you walk with this same Mary Barton, and are known to be courting her, and her as spoke to me about it, thinks as how Mary loves you. That may be or may not, but I'm an old friend of hers and her father's, and I just wish to know if you mean to marry the girl. Spite of what you said of her lightness, I had known her long enough to be sure she'll make a noble wife for anyone, let him be what he may, and I mean to stand by her like a brother, and if you mean rightly, you'll not think the worst on me for what I've now said, and if, but no, I'll not say what I'll do to the man who wrongs a hair of her head. He shall rue it to the longest day he lives, that's all. Now, sir, what I ask of you is this. If you mean fair and honourable by her, well and good, but if not, for your own sake as well as hers, leave her alone, and never speak to her more." Jem's voice quivered with the earnestness with which he spoke, and he eagerly waited for some answer. Harry Carson, meanwhile, instead of attending very particularly to the purpose the man had in addressing him, was trying to gather from his speech what was the real state of the case. He succeeded so far as to comprehend that Jem inclined to believe that Mary loved his rival, and consequently that if the speaker were attached to her himself, he was not a favoured admirer. The idea came into Mr. Carson's mind that perhaps, after all, Mary loved him in spite of her frequent and obstinate rejections, and that she had employed this person, whoever he was, to bully him into marrying her. He resolved to try and ascertain more correctly the man's relation to her. Either he was a lover, and if so, not a favoured one, in which case Mr. Carson could not at all understand the man's motives for interesting himself in securing her marriage, or he was a friend, an accomplice, whom she had employed to bully him. So little faith in goodness have the mean and selfish. "Before I make you into my confidant, my good man," said Mr. Carson, in a contemptuous tone, "I think it might be as well to inquire your right to meddle with our affairs. Neither Mary nor I, as I conceive, called you in as a mediator." He paused. He wanted a distinct answer to the last supposition. None came, so he began to imagine he was to be threatened into some engagement, and his angry spirit rose. "And so, my fine fellow, you will have the kindness to leave us to ourselves, and not to meddle with what does not concern you. If you were a brother or a father of hers, the case might have been different. As it is, I can only consider you an impertinent meddler." Again he would have passed on, but Jem stood in a determined way before him, saying: "You say, if I had been her brother, or her father, you'd have answered me what I ask. Now, neither father nor brother could love her as I have loved her, ay, and as I love her still. If love gives a right to satisfaction, it's next to impossible any one breathing can come up to my right. Now, sir, tell me, do you mean fair by Mary or not? I've proved my claim to know, and, by G, I will know." "Come, come, no impudence," replied Mr. Carson, who, having discovered what he wanted to know, namely, that Jem was a lover of Mary's, and that she was not encouraging his suit, wished to pass on, "father, brother, or rejected lover," with an emphasis on the word rejected. "No one has a right to interfere between my little girl and me. Not one shall. Confound you, man, get out of my way, or I'll make you," as Jem still obstructed his path with dogged determination. "I won't, then, till you've given me your word about Mary," replied the mechanic, grinding his words out between his teeth, and the livid paleness of the anger he could no longer keep down covering his face till he looked ghastly. "Won't you?" with a taunting laugh. "Then I'll make you." The young man raised his slight cane, and smote the artisan across the face with a stinging stroke. An instant afterwards he lay stretched in the muddy road, Jem standing over him, panting with rage. What he would have done next in his moment of ungovernable passion no one knows, but a policeman from the main street, into which this road led, had been sauntering about for some time, unobserved by the either of the parties, and expecting some kind of conclusion like the present to the violent discussion going on between the two young men. In a minute he had pinioned Jem, who sullenly yielded to the surprise. Mr. Carson was on his feet directly, his face glowing with rage or shame. "Shall I take him to the lock-up for assault, sir?" said the policeman. "No, no," exclaimed Mr. Carson. "I struck him first. It was no assault on his side, though," he continued, hissing out his words to Jem, who even hated freedom procured for him, however justly, at the intervention of his rival. "I will never forgive or forget insult. Trust me." He gasped the words in excess of passion. "Mary shall fare no better for your insolent interference." He laughed, as if with the consciousness of power. Jem replied with equal excitement, "And if you dare to injure her in the least, I will wait you where no policeman can step in between, and God shall judge between us two." The policeman now interfered with persuasions and warnings,